Hi everyone, welcome to Belle's Books. I'm Carly and today I'm bringing you my review of The Sentence by Louise Erdrich, which I think is pronounced Erdrich. I've heard someone else say, I don't know. Anyway, I read this because it is on the shortlist for the Women's Prize for Fiction. The winner is being announced in 2 days' time. And so I think this is the last book of the shortlist that I can read before that announcement. Anyway, let me talk to you about this book. I had mixed feelings about this before going in because I'd seen so many reviews where it was like very mixed reviews. People either liked it or didn't. So I didn't really have kind of any high hopes or anything. But my God, was I surprised. I love this book so much. I've never read any Louise Erdrich before and I was just so happy reading this book. I loved it. I loved everything about it. And I know that lots of people struggled with the kind of the dual aspect of it. So if you don't know, you probably do because it's quite popular now. This is a story about Tuki, who is our protagonist. And we follow Tuki, who is haunted. She works in a bookshop, is haunted by the ghost of a previous customer. Now, I really liked that storyline. I enjoyed that very much because I like magic realism. I like stories about ghosts. That was right up my street. So I very much was here for that storyline. Then the narrative shifts kind of halfway through the book. And you can tell that Louise Erdrich started writing this book and then the pandemic happened and George Floyd's murder happened and the protests happened. And she incorporates all of that into this book. And I know lots of people didn't like that and just it didn't work for them, but it really worked for me. And I thought it was just so well done. And yes, you can see where that shift happens. But for me, I just thought it worked because you say we've got this storyline of Tuki being haunted. That's just what's happening in her life, right? Yes, it's weird because it's a ghost story, but like the idea of the pandemic, of a novel being either about the pandemic and what happened in 2020 and the BLM protests, or being about a ghost story, I don't think that's necessary. Like to have both of those things in a book, in one novel, that worked fine for me. It didn't really cause me any issues because the thing with everything that happened in 2020, it interrupted everyone's lives no matter what was going on. You know, it's not like you can just be like, the pandemic happened and nothing else was happening at that time. Weird shit goes on in people's lives and the pandemic hit it and affected everyone differently, obviously. So for me, I was just like, yes, I'm following this storyline of this woman being haunted by a ghost and then all of this other shit goes down. And it just worked and I thought it was fabulous. I really enjoyed this book. I love the writing style. This is the first book I think I've read that gives a Native American perspective. I don't know why I haven't read anything like that before, but I really enjoyed those parts. So it's something that I've never heard of before. It's something that I've never read. Now, obviously, I want to read lots more from that kind of perspective. So I really enjoyed Tuki as a character, all of the surrounding characters that work in the bookshop, learning about them, how they live, the food descriptions in here I really enjoyed. And Tuki's partner, Pollux, is he's like a ceremonial person that goes out and conducts these ceremonies. And I really enjoyed learning about that and I want to know more about that. So that was really interesting. Also, this book is quite meta. So it's written by Louise Erdrich and Louise features as a character in this book. She is the bookshop owner because it is set in her bookshop. She owns an independent bookshop in Minneapolis. And I really enjoyed that because I love metafiction. I love any references to books within books. So this is a real book lover's book. Also, I really enjoy this cover. I know loads of people hate this cover, but I don't know why I'm on my own here. I really like it. So I really enjoyed all the references of different books throughout this novel, some of which I knew and I can go, oh yeah, some of which I didn't, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to look that up. Also really appreciated, in the back there's a whole list of Tuki's favourite books by category. I enjoyed that very much. So yes, things that I really loved was just the characters. I thought they were really well drawn characters. I loved the interactions and the dynamics between the relationships. So between Tuki and her husband, there was kind of a power dynamic going on there, because this isn't a spoiler, but right at the beginning you find out that Tuki is arrested for a crime, and he is the one that arrests her. And so there's always that kind of that awkwardness about their relationship, is that he kind of put her in that position, and she then went on to serve a sentence in prison. That happens like in the first chapter, so that's not a spoiler. One thing that I didn't particularly gel with was the first chapter. So I struggled with that first chapter. I thought, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like this. The premise of Tuki's crime is really weird. So the thing that she does that lands her in prison is just the weirdest thing, and I didn't quite believe that. And so that kind of put me on the back foot. But then after that first chapter, when we start being in the bookshop and Tuki is out of prison and she's married and happy and like talking about her family, I really enjoyed from then onwards. It's just the first chapter I felt a bit like clunky. It didn't really work, and but other than that, that was the only kind of negative thing about this book. Everything else I just really enjoyed. I like the theme of ghosts. Obviously it is a literal ghost haunting Tuki, but I like the theme of ghosts and haunting as a more wider context in terms of how you can be haunted personally and culturally. So I thought that was really interesting. There's a part of the storyline with the ghost is that the ghost is a white woman who is kind of placing herself in Native American culture, like a cultural appropriation deal, where she's just getting involved with all of these things that are not part of her culture, but she desperately wants to be part of that. So I found that a really interesting commentary, and a look at cultural appropriation, and I thought it worked really well. Excuse me. Wow, the light in here is crazy today. I thought it worked really well. And the resolution of that ghost story at the end, I know lots of people again were like kind of disappointed with it, but I thought it worked again really well. I thought it was like the perfect ending to that haunting. I debated going into spoilers here, and I might do actually. Yeah, let's do it. So I'm going to put a big spoiler warning here. So if you haven't read the book and you want to read the book, click away now, because I am going to go into kind of spoiler territory. Right, so the thing that I wanted to say about the ending is the way that the ghost of Flora is resolved was with a ceremony where Tuki chose words to speak aloud, and it kind of released Flora from this haunting. And I thought that was so appropriate, because the emphasis on this book is about language and words and stories, and how you interact with other people and what you say to other people. And the feeling I got from it was that Tuki kind of feels almost a little bit removed from her Native American culture, because she was not so like absorbed in it like her husband is and the other people around her are. So that time where they go to the ceremony and Tuki lends her daughter her jingle dress, which I really want to see a picture of these dresses because it sounds amazing, because she didn't feel like she wanted to wear it, because that is a like a big part of their culture. So she gives the dress to her daughter to wear, and I just got the impression that she was kind of not outside of that, of her own culture, but a little bit on the margins of it. So the point of the ceremony where she says these words to release Flora from her haunting, I thought was really apt, and it kind of mirrored the fact that she's using language and ceremony to make a shift in her life, to take agency and take back control over something that's been happening to her that she hasn't had control over. And it felt kind of like a bit of a mirror of what her husband does when he goes to these ceremonies and you know, does all these ceremonial rites. So I felt that was like a really apt way to get rid of the ghost and release the haunting. So I really enjoyed that part. Oh yeah, and I really enjoyed the kind of the little nods to like the folklore, and there were some words that I wasn't familiar with, and like the story around Hetter's baby's lineage. So when Hetter's boyfriend, I've immediately forgotten his name, Laurent, I don't know. When he's telling the story of his heritage and this thing that that runs through his family line, that to me just was like pure folklore, and I loved it so much. And I loved that Hetta loved it as well, because it seemed, again, like the ghost storyline, it seemed so far-fetched and like, what? But she was so there for it, and I loved that interaction where he's telling them this story, and Hetta is like, okay, so cool, so that's my baby's heritage, and he's possibly going to be this form of person. I just loved it so much. I thought it was great. I don't really have anything else to say about this book. I just loved it so much, and when I love a book so much, I always struggle to sum it up, but I just loved all of it. Like I said, apart from the first chapter that I struggled to get into, but after that I just adored it. As usual with when it's American writing, there are some things that kind of just go over my head a little bit, like references I don't get, but that was quite minor. So if this won the Women's Prize, I would be super happy with that, because I just loved it so much. And you know, it's one of those books that I'm keeping because I possibly will reread. Also, I've got loads of book recommendations from this, and to go forward really want to learn more and read more about kind of that Native American culture and history. So yeah, it was fascinating. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say was I found it really interesting to hear about the BLM protests in Minneapolis, because obviously we saw it on the news and that kind of content is mediated. So I really enjoyed the perspective of what it was like to go on those protests in the town where George Floyd was murdered, and the response from the police, and what those protesters had to put up with, like being tear gassed. And I felt like that narrative did a really good job of putting you in that moment and feeling the anger and fear and like determination to fight back against police brutality. And obviously this book can be quite triggering. It deals with some very difficult content. The pandemic stuff I didn't really struggle with, but you know, I think depending on where you are with the pandemic and how you feel about it, it could be quite difficult to read. But I found it really interesting to hear about like the way that people would go on these protests, and just I thought the writing was really great around that, and it was so well done and sensitively handled. I thought it was fantastic. So highly recommend this book. We shall see if it wins the Women's Prize this week. I have now picked up a copy of Sorrow and Bliss, but I'm not going to read that in time. So whatever the winner is, if I haven't read it already, I will be reading it next. I also have a review to bring you of Leonie Ross's This One Sky Day, because I did finish that. So that will be coming up next, as will my May wrap up. So I will speak to you all very soon in another video. I hope you're all doing okay. Talk to me in the comments below, particularly if you've read the sentence or if you want to read the sentence. Tell me what you think about it and what you think is going to win the Women's Prize. Predictions below, please. Thank you very much, and I will see you very soon. Bye, everyone.